Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. This is a follow-up video to one that I just put out there. It's sum ifs and VLOOKUP, very basic, very simple. Some exact, setting exact ranges within the formulas, and then a general conversion for average handle time or an average work standard. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to produce a pivot table off of the same table of data that we have over here. What I am going to do is I'm going to duplicate this data really quick as an example, so that way we can kind of set everything to, we're going to have multiple months basically. So in this one we're going to find 7 because we were previously dealing with the month that was 7th, and then we're going to replace it with 8, kind of converting everything over to August. So now we have data for both August and July. Very common. You're working anywhere in the world, a month goes by, you got your next month, you want to see how you did this month versus last month. This is a quick and easy way to do it with pivot tables. So we're going to capture our data range, which I'm going to call this out for a minute. So there's a quick and easy shortcut on your keyboard to basically highlight everything within a range that has data filled in. The keystroke is going to be Control Shift, and if we're starting from the left, then it's going to be right arrow, and then if we want to go down, you're going to go down arrow. So the Control and Shift makes it go basically cascade until it runs out of data. Real quick and easy way to highlight something. If you just want to go one at a time, you can just hit Shift. If you want to just go to the bottom, you hold Control. Control goes to the bottom, left, right, basically wherever the data ends. It just depends on what you're trying to do. For our instance, we're trying to highlight the data so that way we can insert a pivot table, and we're classifying that as a table basically. So this is going to be a pivot off of that table of data. We're going to throw it on another sheet. We are going to set our agents as our rows. So there's all of our agents. Looks nice. Then alphabetical, pivot table did that automatically. We are going to set in our date range. Look at that, it even categorized it by month. Fantastic. It even put in little expand and collapse options. If you wanted to see it by day, you'd simply right click on this and ungroup it. It's very powerful to be able to see it by day, so I always group it by, or not by day, by months. So I always group it by months. If you want to have both, you would essentially just click on both. You could do years, quarters, etc. And then a quick way to collapse everything at once is you come right up here in your pivot table ribbon. If you're off your pivot table, the pivot table ribbon won't exist. So you want to click in your pivot table. It brings you to your analysis. If you click on the section that has a drop down, you can expand and contract, with a simple single click there. I've seen plenty of people either doing it, one little line item at a time, which can be pretty painful. So that's just, that much easier. All right, so now what do we want to see? We want to see the number of calls that they all took. You notice initially this is dropping in the sum of calls. A lot of times you run into, when you're working with data, when you drop your values over here, it doesn't come across as sum immediately. So you come into your field settings and you can kind of set it to whatever you want. If you want to know the average, so on and so forth. Just be careful when you're working with averages. Make sure you don't have any zeros in there. And if you remember from the previous video, we wanted to see how long it took on average for our group here to take to take a phone call. If we were to take this talk time and put it in here, this number is going to be huge. This is all the seconds that we're working with. So all the seconds, which is this information here, right? We were playing with this last time. And now you can see it's just there. It's a massive amount. It doesn't really give me a lot of information. It just tells me they spent a lot of time talking to people or doing work, whatever your work standard is. I don't need the grand total here, so I'm going to get rid of the grand total. It's the same number of phone calls because I just duplicated that data. So what I am going to do is I'm going to add a field. So it's going to be a calculated field. This calculated field is going to do for us a couple of things. It's going to add our talk time, our ACD time, and our hold time together, and that's going to divide it by our total number of calls. It's going to produce our work standard, so average handle time, average amount of time it took for that task. So these are very similar to formulas, not exactly the same. they're a little, you know, less complex. It's a kind of a simpler, straightforward method. So I'm just adding up basically, you know, the different columns of data, just as I would before. I would have used the sum before. I could have used the addition symbols, right? But that seems very basic. And then I'm going to divide that by the number of calls that they took over time. So what that does is it adds a new field over here for me. And then voila, it's got our average handle time. So again, flipping back over here, if you remember how we did that, we did the sum of these divided by the total number of calls produces your average handle time. If you want to see it in minutes, you divide it by 60 seconds. If you want to get flashy with it, you could put the divide by 60 in there and have it show minutes initially. I mean, you can get all kinds of creative with it. It's all about what you want to show. So that's a quick and easy way. Produce a pivot table off of basically a table of data. Kind of a key thing that you have to remember when working with most of this stuff is you will need a table. The table format, having data kind of spliced around all over the place doesn't necessarily flow. You want to be able to navigate through your information pretty seamlessly, because that's what Excel needs to do to produce these kind of graphic visuals or the pivot table. So you always want to make sure that you're working with the table. You can actually take the range itself and convert it into a table if you wanted to, and then now this is a bona fide table as far as Excel is concerned. You can get pretty fancy once you start creating tables. Then you can start adding connections between sheets if you have data on multiple sheets, but that's for another much more complex episode. Right now we're just talking pivot tables and functionality within pivot tables. Cool part about the pivot table is that once you have your pivot table and all your summarized data, a lot of times people don't just want to read data, they want to graph, right? You have your pivot graphs right here. We just throw your pivot graph in there. There's all the individuals, who's taking what. We stack them against each other. It's going to show you everything that's in the pivot table, which is a little bit unfortunate. So if you did want to filter it, or you didn't want to show handle time anymore, you would want to just go ahead and remove that from your pivot table. And then now you got this nice clean pivot chart. You can add data table to it if you wanted to, data labels. Very clean. It lets you come up here and design. I typically work with the black background, but then you got these ugly buttons on here. You can just right click on one of the buttons and hit hide buttons. Now we're working with a traditional graph that you might see in Excel. So all right, I mean, I think that one sums it up for this video. It's pretty straightforward. You know, building a pivot table is going to get you much faster, cleaner, and expandable when working with data, you know, in the table format. So if we were to grow this table, like let's say we're going to grow it, right? Another month has gone by, 2 months, whatever. So now we got all this extra data. We want our pivot table to go look and fetch that data. If it's not in a column table to where your table starts at the top, you will have to resize where your pivot table is looking. So you want to change your data source. It's real easy. Click up there, Control Shift left arrow, Control Shift down arrow, enter. Pop back in there, boom, everything just doubled. Nice, quick, easy. It refreshed. Traditionally, typically, whenever I'm working with a data set, you want to have it look like this. You want it to be the first row. That way you can simply highlight the columns as your range. So let's pretend this is the same pivot table. Instead of looking so like unique at this one table, we can look at this sheet and take those columns, and now everything within those columns is going to be displayed within our pivot table. We'll need to regroup it again. Simple stuff. Minimize everything. Nice and easy. Straightforward. If there's something on there that doesn't make sense, basically because we have all those blanks, you just hide that section. Now we're back to square one. So the best part about that is that as soon as we enter something in, right, let's say, not there, not in that table, at the end of this one, let's say, you know, 9-1 comes rolling around, Mr. Edwards takes 1,000 phone calls. Come over here, refresh it, there it is. Nice, easy, simple. Pivot tables make your life that much easier, and if you're working with massive amounts of data, being able to navigate them will make your life that much easier and make you that much more efficient and that much more valuable to whoever you're producing your data for. So, all right. Well, that's this video go around. Again, just covered basics of pivot tables. So if you have any questions, you know, feel free to leave me a comment. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you'd like to see something additional. Or if you hated the video, feel free to leave a comment. But I hope you all enjoyed it. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.